What's up? Kevin here, back with another video. So this is going to be a part 2 to my whole work history story, like all the shit I've been through so far. So where did I leave off? Oh, that's right. So this was in 2018. So in the previous video I talked a little bit about the first couple jobs I worked. I talked a little bit about how I got laid off my first job, then I worked a couple of seasonal jobs that I wasn't at that long. Really didn't matter too much, didn't really impact my life that much. And then there was the other one that I was at for like 6 freaking years. I learned all these skills, but my pay didn't really reflect that. So eventually, once a better opportunity came, I'm like, shit, I'm getting the fuck out. So I ended up getting this new job, and this was actually at, so I don't know if anybody's worked for FedEx before, like FedEx Ground, but I ended up working at one of those big hubs, those big facilities, where all the packages come in on the conveyor belts, and you got to sort everything out, and it goes into the trailers and gets shipped off all over the place. I worked at one of those, and at the time, so at the time, I didn't necessarily just quit my current job and move and start working there. I was a little cautious. I kind of was like, well, I hear this job's pretty tough. I don't know if I'm going to be cut out for this. And I did end up getting an interview, because back then they actually had interviews. Now it's like you just fill out the stuff online. It's like, it tells you when your first day is. But back then we actually came in for an interview. Really easy, just, can you do this? Can you lift these boxes? Could you lift this? As long as you're not, severely disabled, I suppose. Anyway. So I ended up getting that, and then they asked me like what schedule I wanted, because they had 4 different schedules. So when you first start, you start off part-time. They don't just take you in off the streets and start working you full-time. I mean, the amount of injuries you would have doing that shit would be unbelievable. Because I would soon learn. So I ended up doing this whole thing, got the interview, blah blah. They asked me what schedule I wanted, and I'm kind of like, well, I would have preferred. So there's 4 shifts. They're called sorts, but they're basically like shifts. They're around 4 or 5 hours. You come in, you work 4 or 5 hours, then you leave. The first one is around noon to about 5 in the afternoon, give or take. I mean, it will fluctuate depending on how busy it is, what time of year it is. I mean, sometimes they don't even start till like 2. But let's say 12 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 3, and then like 3, 4 a.m. to like 9 in the morning. I would have preferred the twilight, that's the 5 p.m. to 10 one, because I could have just worked my first job. I was going to try to work both jobs at once. Well, work 2 jobs. The only time I ever worked more than 1 job at a time, by the way. And it was probably one of the hardest fucking things. I've never been so freaking tired and sore. So for those out there who are working 2 or 3 jobs, man, I give you guys credit. So anyway, I really wanted the twilight shift, but that one was full apparently, so I only had 2 choices, either the day shift from 12 to 5, or I could come in during the sunrise, which is basically the 4 a.m. to like 9. And I realized if I won the day, I would have to just put in my 2 weeks, quit my job, and just, take that leap of faith. I ended up not doing that. I ended up more or less monkey branching from one job to the next. I kind of worked two for a while, and then once I realized I had a chance at this new one, once I got the hang of the second job, I ended up just quitting my first one. But obviously I couldn't work day, so my only other choice was the sunrise. So I would have to come in at 4 a.m. each day. My crazy ass. So now, not only am I still working my current job during the day, now I gotta come home, take a nap, get up at like 2, 3 a.m., get dressed, go to this other place, start working there. And man, it's crazy. You'd think that I would be in really good shape working 6 years at this physical labor job in a warehouse, but man, oh man. When I started picking up those boxes, because of course, when I first started working there, they had me loading trailers, loading trucks, top to bottom, wall by wall, row by row, from the back all the way to the front. And man, oh man, I started feeling it real quick, real early. That shit, I was 26 at the time, and that shit had me feeling like I was 40s, 50s. I felt like a freaking old man. Holy crap. I remember I was taking freaking pain meds, ibuprofen, putting some this pain relieving cream on my back. Crazy. But at that job, I kind of, one good advantage of that is that there was a lot of opportunity to move up. So there was this one job that I particularly wanted there. It was they're called switchers. They're basically like the guys, they're kind of like yard jockeys. So that's basically like you're outside working in the yard, driving these trucks. They're not little trucks. They're pretty big. You're driving these things around, hooking up the trailers, and you're driving them around the yard, and you're backing them up on the docks so that the people inside can go inside and unload or load them. So I'm like, I want that job. So I ended up applying for it, and surprisingly, I actually did get an interview. I was actually really surprised, and I ended up nailing the interview on my first try. At the same time, I also applied for full time, because by that point I'd been there a couple months, starting to get the hang of it, starting to get faster, because there it's all about, you got to be fast, you got to be able to load these packages at a certain rate. And back then you had to scan every single freaking package you had. You had this little hand scanner that you wear, and you had to scan every single barcode before you stack it up. And I was doing that for a while. I decided, take the plunge, go full time, because working two jobs at once, especially one during the day and one at night, was just freaking exhausting. I mean, I was just living off of caffeine, going home, taking a nap, going to one job, going home, taking a nap, going to another job. I was actually working 7 days a week. I had no days off. I'm like, this is totally unsustainable. So I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm making 15 an hour at this new job. I might as well go full time and take advantage of overtime and all that good stuff. Make even more. By that point, I probably was making twice as much as I had working my first job. So I ended up applying for the switcher position and the full-time position at the same time. And I ended up getting the full-time. So now I'm doing that shit full-time. So instead of coming in at 4 a.m., so I ended up finally putting in my 2 weeks. I finally ended up talking to my manager at my old job, which I had been absolutely dreading because this was my first time actually quitting a job in my whole life. Like all the other ones were either seasonal or I got laid off or something like that. But here it's like, here's a manager I've been working for like 6 freaking years. And you almost feel like a misplaced sense of loyalty. Like you feel like you're betraying them. You've been working here for so long, you kind of have a bit of, I don't want to say like a relationship, but it's kind of like, you've been helping out, they see how hard of a worker you are, how good of a worker you are, and now you come in, now you tell them that, hey, I gotta go, I'm leaving, I found something else. But my manager was pretty understanding. I mean, I think she realized, I was getting older, I was kind of outgrowing the position. And I also, I knew I wasn't really gonna get that far there anyway. I learned pretty much everything I could. So it's time to move on. And I wasn't making nearly enough. I was still living with my parents at the time, and I wasn't making nearly enough to move on my own. I'm like, this is not gonna work. So I ended up going through with that. I ended up quitting that job. So now I'm full-time at this new job at FedEx. So before I was coming in at 4 a.m., now I'm coming in at 10 p.m. So from 10 p.m. till like 8, 9, 10 a.m. So I'm in there, and this was right around, the whole busy season for the holidays was starting, the whole peak season. So the hours were getting pretty crazy. I was working some 10, 11, 12 hours. First I would come in for like the overnight. I would unload, which is actually a lot easier than loading. I mean, it's still a physically taxing job. There you're basically just like pulling boxes down and stacking them onto a little on rollers, on conveyor belts, and just take them right out of the truck. But I do that for a good portion of the night, and then around 4 a.m. is when you get a break. Obviously you get like, I'd say I work till like 3 a.m. then from like 3 a.m. till about 3:55. It's about an hour. I'd come back in, get ready for the next sort, starting at 4. Now I'm loading, which was definitely the harder of the two, because that's the one where you have to like scan the packages and load them up and stack them up. But I ended up doing that, and at the same time I ended up getting an interview for the switcher position, and I'm like, oh good. Well, I ended up getting the switcher position. So I didn't necessarily start out there right off the bat, because I guess the guy who was training me, they had him doing all this other stuff inside, so I kind of had to wait. So I was kind of stuck still loading packages for a few more months. But eventually they got me out there, they got me trained, certified, and it's like great. Now I'm outside, now I'm out in the yard, now I get to drive around, I get to drive trailers. And I was making more too. So that was good. So in in just a few months, it's like I pretty much quadrupled my income. And so I'm like, wow, man, I'm really moving on up here. It was a good feeling. I mean, the nights were long. I mean, working nights freaking sucks. It can be really hard on your body. Don't always sleep that well during the day. It could be a bit much to get used to. So I did that for a while. I'd say by my 1 year anniversary working there, I was pretty comfortable. I was alright with it. I ended up taking a vacation, took some time off, came back. I'm like, this job ain't too bad. Making good money. What's not to love? So I do remember I did have this one coworker there who was on part of my group, my crew. And this guy was always talking to me. I think the first time I ever saw him was when I was inside, lifting boxes, and he basically was talking about like my technique and my lifting, and he was warning me not to hurt my back because the back is like the most important part, one of the most important parts of you. You don't want to fuck up your back. And he ended up working outside with me too. He ended up being a switcher as well, but the guy would always talk about all the jobs he's worked in his life, all the hard jobs he's done, doing physical labor. He was a truck driver. I think he worked at one of those I think he would operate like a crane. He worked on some ship and operated a crane that would pick up those massive shipping containers or something. So just, blue collar, hard work, working his butt off his whole life. Multiple surgeries. There's multiple injuries. That guy, you could see it. You could just see it in the way he walked. The freaking pain that guy was in. He even said that every night he was in pain. Just watching him climb in and out of his truck, man, he's like grabbing the railings and like trying to pull himself up. I'm like, this is miserable just to watch this. Don't know how old the guy was. He seemed older. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, Kevin, whatever you do not end up like that man. Like that is a freaking disaster. That's like a half broken man right there. I'll be damned if I end up like that. Do not end up like that, man. Do not be like that. You're a smart guy. Use your head. Work smarter, not harder. It's not worth killing yourself. So, I worked there for a while, and I say right around the 2020, pandemic, that whole disaster. Now, I was an essential worker, so I still had to show up. This was a time when, people were losing their jobs, people were confined to their homes, people were stressed, depressed, anxious, gaining weight, getting fat, just, it was a disaster. It was a hard year. I think that goes without saying. But me, not only did I have to work, but I had to work extra long, extra hard. The good side of that is they actually did increase our pay. So now I was making even more. And this would go on to become, this was pretty much the most I was making in my life at the time. But, what were once 50-hour weeks were now turning into 60, 70 hours, it was like almost like peak hours, but it was just non-fucking stop. I ended up holding out for a bit, and then sometimes it would be so busy, and they would need it so bad, we'd have to work an extra day. So instead of working, say, 5 nights in a row, now we're working 6 nights. For a period of several months. And I know at one point, it was like, I worked 6 nights, get out of work Saturday morning, around 9-10 a.m. I got the rest of Saturday and Saturday night, but I got to be back at work the next day by 3 p.m. for a whole another 6 weeks, start all over again. And it's like every night was like 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours, Now, this was a period where I kind of went on I had a bit of a glow up phase. I had a bit of a phase where it's like I started to, while most people were getting fat and out of the gym, my gym was actually closed down, but I had, I actually had some workout equipment, so I'd work out of home. And I remember, like, even though I was working all these hours, I would still come home and try to get some training in. But it was exhausting. Like, it was freaking, I was so tired. I was living off caffeine. I was burnt out all the time. You know, I hung in there for months after month of just working 6 nights a week, 12, 13-hour nights outside, you know, in the freezing cold and the pouring rain, you know. And I think at one point, like, I'm driving and I'm thinking about what I want to do in life. I'm thinking about all my goals and stuff. Now, I was doing pretty good. I was making, like, never in my life was I making this much money. You know, I was pretty stacked. I mean, I had my whole emergency fund was completely, I had a whole emergency fund. I was starting to contribute to my own retirement, my own Roth IRA. Because at the time we didn't have a 401k, so I kind of opened up my own Roth IRA, started contributing to that. I maxed that out every year. So I'm like, you know, financially, I was looking good. You know, I was making some smart moves. Meanwhile, my coworkers are wasting their money on bullshit, talking about all these things they want to buy. You know, because if they come to this job, they work, and then they just want to spend all their hard-earned money on pleasure. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about, like, you know, how I'm gonna, you know, save up my money and get the fuck out of there. So I'm thinking about all the stuff I want, you know, I want to achieve in life. And it's just like, at the moment, it was just like, man, you know, it's all the stuff I want, and it just feels so far away. You know, just turning up here, it's like I spend more time at this place than I did with my own family. And I'm just like, just work, work, work. And I'm thinking, you know, all I want is just like a simple life, you know, where I just need a nice little patch of land somewhere, a nice little home, you know, live self-sufficiently, grow my own food, just live a simple freaking life. And it's just like, it just seems like it's just so much to ask. You know, it's like, it feels so far away, you know, it's like, and I'm thinking about this, and, well, I ended up kind of breaking down. For whatever reason, I just started bawling my eyes out. This is at work. I'm like freaking driving around, and I realized, like, I was like fucking miserable. It's like, you got this guy, I'm driving around, I'm freaking bawling my eyes out, crying at work. You know, because it's like, I felt like I had no life. You know, like I was just wasting my life away, working my ass off, man. And I was completely unsure as to whether I'd even be able to achieve what I wanted in life or not. And so, you know, I realized, you know, the job was good at first, but I realized I was just like fucking miserable now. Like, with all these hours, all this extra work I've been taking on, barely get to see my family. I don't have time to go to any, like, events. There were a lot of things that I wanted to do. Obviously, I couldn't do a whole lot, you know, because of everything was closed down, everything was shut down. Was like, even if I could, you know, even if this hadn't happened and there was no pandemic, I wouldn't have had the freaking time. I mean, I had aspirations. You know, go to the gym. I had, in the past, gone to like I used to train at like an MMA gym. I used to do a little bit of jiu-jitsu, a little bit of MMA. And it's like, trying to balance that stuff with all this work, it's hard. And then as far as, by that point, I was working pretty much, you know, half the weekend away. And then my one day off, I'm like so exhausted, I have no energy. to like freaking do anything. And in the meantime, I'm trying to find other ways. I was trying to generate other income streams to try to like supplement my income so I didn't have to work so much. So I started experimenting, started trying different side hustles on the side while all this is going on. So that would take up like my whole one day off. But it's just like, man, this shit's hard. And I think I also realized, you know, like I don't want to be doing this stuff the rest of my life. You know, it's like I see my coworkers, I see like, you know, they just show up, they work, they go home, they spend their money on a bunch of pointless stuff. And then they stay stuck. And by this point, I was starting to look into finance. I was starting to look into business, finance, stuff like that. I started reading whole books on it, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Started learning about assets, liabilities. Started learning about how to generate multiple income streams. I learned about the rat race. And I'm like, man, I don't want to end up in that position. So I started looking at all these different strategies and how to get out of that shit. And you know what? I actually was still living with my parents at the time. I guess my strategy was I saw how expensive everything was, and like obviously I didn't want to stay at my job forever. So I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Like, slow down, pal. Like, I might be making some good money now, but do I really want to just take off, you know, get someplace, you know, spend all this freaking, you know, work all these hours to make all this money to spend it all on some fucking shitty ass apartment that I barely spend time in anyway, you know, because I'm always working. It's like, hold on, man. You know, for a guy who aspires to be a homeowner, which is, I mean, that's getting more and more difficult to achieve nowadays. Now that people, you know, now the way things are for millennials and Gen Z, it ain't looking too good. It's like becoming a homeowner is becoming it's like a dream. So I'm thinking, well, hold on, hang on here. Like, before you jump out there and get caught up in that mess, in that freaking hamster wheel, why don't we make as much money as we can, save our money up, try to generate multiple income streams, start a side hustle, save your money, so that I can eventually get my own place, my own house or something. You know, also, it's worth noting, you know, like, I'm a single man. Like, I don't have a wife, I don't have kids, I don't have mouths to feed. So, the only person I gotta worry about is me. So I was thinking, you know, dude, just like be smart, save up your money, right? And then once you're ready, you can get your own place, you can do your own thing. Invest in yourself. And it's like I know that seems kind of, oh, you know, like you're a grown man, you should be out on your own. But I don't know. I don't want to be freaking stuck in some situation like that, you know, working my butt off, especially in this kind of economy, which just feels like it's rigged against you and just wants to keep you stuck, fucking broke, stuck all the time. So I saw that shit from a mile away. I'm like, I see what other people are going through. I do not want any fucking part of that. I know that sounds kind of like selfish and irresponsible, little fucking man-child here. But, like, that's just how it is. I mean, like how I mentioned before, sometimes you just gotta fight dirty. My folks were fine. Like, they were totally fine with me hanging around. They weren't trying to kick me out or nothing. If they were, I would have left. But I'm like, I was in my 20s at the time, and I'm like, I even had this idea. I mean, as soon as I started working in this job, I kind of started to realize, I'm like, wait a minute. It's not so great. Not so great out there. Like, let me get to a position where I'm making some, like, really fucking good money, before I move out there. And on one hand, it was good because it kind of taught me to manage my money, save up, invest. I was really good at. I wasn't, buying a bunch of bullshit I didn't need, like so many other people. So on one hand, it did give me a lot of discipline, at least as far as managing your money goes. And I was doing pretty good. I was saving a pretty good amount. Matter of fact, in retrospect, I would have to say, like, if I hung in there, and kept doing that shit a little bit longer, I probably would have been in a much stronger position. I probably could have had my own place by now. Like, like an actual house. Although, you could say that's kind of a trap in of itself. With a freaking mortgage and all that. So it makes you wonder what's actually better, renting or owning. So I was working at this place. And as time went on, I started to get more and more sick and tired of it. I started looking for more ways to just started looking at other jobs, easier shit. Sad part was I couldn't find anything that was any better than what I was doing already. I'm like, man, it all freaking sucks. It either doesn't pay enough, I'm not qualified for it, I'm too impatient to go through the whole learning curve and jump through all those hoops to get whatever certificate, degree, license I need to pursue another path. A lot of this stuff just doesn't interest me at all or resonate with me at all. So it's kind of like, okay, well, there's not really anything else out there that great. So I was at that point where it's just like, I'm working all these hours and I'm just looking. I'm looking for every other opportunity I can find. But at the same time, I kind of realized there weren't many options at the time. And there wasn't really much I could do outside of work. There wasn't a lot of other things I could pursue, like goals, hobbies. Everything was kind of shut down. So it's kind of like I felt like I had no freaking life. And it was nice having all that money, but obviously I couldn't do anything with it because it's all saved up. It's all put away. I gotta wait. It's not there to just spend frivolously. But I guess I just started getting so just sick and tired of it. I just started getting so fried. Just burnt out. And when that happens, it's like you kind of stop thinking right. You kind of get caught up in your own emotions. You stop thinking right. You stop thinking rationally. Great time to start making stupid decisions when you're in that position. So at the time, I actually did end up getting hurt at one point. I ended up hurting my leg, and when you work a job where you're constantly moving, any kind of injury is gonna freaking slow you down. It's gonna suck. So now I hurt my leg, so now I'm limping. I'm still working, 13, 14 hours. Now I'm limping all the time, getting in and out of my truck. And I'm like, man, this is not it. So I ended up approaching my manager at the time. I basically asked if I could switch to part-time. So I ended up cutting my hours because I was freaking tired. I was exhausted. I'm like, man, I'm tired of working these 14-hour nights, limping around. I need a bit of a break. I need a little bit more time for myself. So I ended up doing that. So I ended up transitioning to part-time. At first it was easy. It was a lot easier. Nights went by a lot faster. Of course, everything is kind of relative, and in time, I started getting tired of that as well. That was probably my first mistake. And at the time, like I said, I was in the best shape of my life. But when I went to part-time, for some reason, first of all, it was weird hours. It was like 10 p.m. on average, like 9, 10 p.m. I would come in. And then I would leave around 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So I would come home and it's just like, it's weird. I couldn't tell if I wanted to sleep or if I wanted to stay up a little bit later and then go to bed later. I kind of got into this situation where it's just like, my sleep schedule got fucked up. And then I don't know why, but first of all, I was in the best shape, but I had been dieting for several months. Like, I was pretty much like hungry all the freaking time at that point. I was in like starvation mode. And for whatever stupid reason, I was doing some crazy shit. I was doing like 1 meal a day and all that. I was hungry all the freaking time. For whatever stupid reason, I decided, you know what? Now that I lost all this weight, I'm kind of like, I was at the leanest in my entire life. I was probably, I don't know, maybe like 15% body fat by this point. But once I get to that point, apparently, I don't know what it is about my body, but apparently whenever I get to that level, it's like my hunger goes through the fucking roof. So I can get down there, but I have a hard time staying down there. And so, for whatever stupid reason, I decided, you know what? Like, let me go back to eating multiple times a day. Like, let me just focus on like bulking and getting bigger. And well, that ended up totally fucking me up. I ended up getting this whole like eating disorder. I couldn't stop freaking eating. So I gained a shit ton of weight at the same time. Doesn't help that I was moving less now that I was working less. So I ended up blowing the fuck up. It's like, oh great. And then, so fast forward a few months. Now I'm working part-time, still at this other job. Things were kind of going on, a bunch of strange shit going on at home. And I got this really weird feeling, this really weird idea of just, I felt this really weird pressure to move. To just like, bro, like, you're old enough, you should probably just like move on. You should probably move out, get your own place. Because at this, like, forget what you were trying to do, forget your freaking dreams, forget about that shit, dude. It's not gonna work. Just go back full time, get a place, and just accept it. It was weird, and it came out of nowhere, and I'm just like, shit. Obviously, I didn't want to do it, but it was just like, I don't know, it was just this nagging feeling. I just kind of felt like a piece of shit just hanging out, you know, living with my folks, working part-time, trying to do all this stuff on the side. And I kind of just felt like, you know, this ain't gonna work. So eventually I did start looking for another place. Not to mention there was a bunch of other shit going on, a bunch of drama and all that. So I'm like, you know what, I gotta go. So I started looking for a place. Of course, I didn't want to go back to full time. I'm like, fuck that shit. I'm not gonna work all those hours just to afford living in some little box. But amazingly, I actually found a place that was within my budget, despite getting my hours cut, not working as much. I actually found a place I could afford. Barely, but it was doable. So I ended up moving out. Moved into a little apartment. Got my own place finally. I'm like, okay, cool. And now I can get away from all that drama, all that crap. I can finally get a break, get my sleep. Well, it ended up not working out so well. I mean, this place was in like a busy part of town. It was loud, it was noisy. I was still working nights. So, you know, I'd go to this job, work. By this point, I was sick to death of it. I would go home to my new place, barely be able to get any sleep because of all the freaking noise in that place. Drove me freaking insane. Like there's days where it's like I wouldn't get any sleep. I'd get like maybe a couple hours or none, then have to go back to work. So I was losing my fucking mind. And so I started looking for other work, started looking for other jobs, started getting online, started applying for all these other positions, many of which was just the same crap. And you know, who knows, maybe I could have transitioned today, you know, now that it's like I'm in an environment that doesn't really support my schedule anymore. So I could have just transitioned to that. But I decided I had enough of that job. I wanted to move on. I wanted to do something else. And I ended up, well, you gotta be careful when you apply on these job things, because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of scams, a lot of these offers that'll tell you everything you want to hear. And when you're as miserable as I was and like desperate, you're gonna make some pretty stupid decisions, and you're gonna fall for some real BS. And that's pretty much what happened to me. So I guess that's enough for now. In the next video, I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up quitting my job, and basically ended up without a real backup plan, how I basically ended up getting roped into a freaking scheme and all that. So yeah, that'll be the next video where I talk about all that. But for now, that's all. So take care.